Therapists, what is something people are afraid to tell you because they think it's weird, but you've actually heard a lot of times before? The amount of people I see who feel like they should be grieving a certain way and are afraid that they must not have loved someone or must not have cared. People grieve in all sorts of ways. The 5 stages of grief, well, those are stupid. I was consulting with another clinician who was seeing a couple whose daughter had passed away. The wife was convinced that the husband must not have cared about her because he wasn't grieving out loud. In reality, while she had been going to support groups and outwardly expressing, he had been continuing to work in a garden that he and his daughter had kept when she was alive, using that time to process and grieve as he did. Both were perfectly fine ways of grieving, however, it is expected that one's grief is more than the other. They both ended up working it out, however. He drove her and others to their weekly support group, her attempting to work in the garden with him on the condition that they didn't talk. Really sweet. To that same extent, the amount of people who are unaware of their own emotions and emotional process is astounding. So many people feel only angry or happy and worry something must be wrong with them otherwise. Normalizing the whole gamut is just as important. Recognizing what we're feeling as well, what it feels like in our body when we're feeling, is incredibly helpful for understanding how we process and feel. As a whole, how we treat emotions as society is kind of messed up. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Yeah, the 5 stages of grief are more like suggestions than rules. Grief doesn't follow a script. You know what I mean? Story 2. That they do not know what they enjoy doing. Often they have people in their life, including therapists, say, try to do something fun today, or ask, what do you like to do when you have free time? Many people I work with do not know what those are. Once I explain that I dislike these statements and questions because they assume people should know the answer, and that many people don't, I can watch as they relax, take a deep breath, and say something to the effect of, oh my, that's so good to hear. I have no idea what I like to do. That's part of the problem. More often than not, they feel like they should know and that everyone else their age has it figured out. They're embarrassed to say that they don't know when in fact not knowing is very common. I couldn't even try to count how many clients I've had this conversation with. All right, so saying you don't know what you like is like admitting you've never seen a single episode of Friends. It's more common than you think. Story 3. Psychologist here. Basically, anything having to do with intimacy. There's so much shame, and I've been told that I have a good psychologist's face. I try not to have a strong reaction to normalize the discussion. With adolescents, they are extremely anxious to tell me if they've relapsed or aren't doing well. They cut one night or they were crazy. They're having a lot of negative self-talk or panic attacks. They'll come in pretending everything is okay. It's usually in the last 10 to 15 minutes that they'll say something. They reveal that they're worried they'd let me down, that I'd be disappointed in them. It usually turns into a discussion about policing other people's feelings and tolerating emotions. I explain that I care about their well-being and it's my job to monitor my emotions and reactions, not their role. Story 4. Clients become quite fearful of admitting that they weren't successful since the last time they had a session. This could include not succeeding in using a coping skill that they're learning about or not being able to complete a homework assignment I gave them. Humans aren't robots and therapy is a lot of work. That being said, I don't expect people to be perfect as they start to work on themselves in a positive way. It takes time to really commit to change, especially in relation to trauma or conflicted views that an individual holds. I feel as if the client doesn't want to let me down as their therapist, but these failure events are just as important to talk about as successful moments. I had to learn this lesson as a client. I suffer with ADHD and struggled immensely with starting and completing my graduate work when I was getting my master's, to the point of sometimes making no progress and not completing any work and putting my student status in jeopardy. My therapist had an idea for me to text him at the end of each day to let him know what I had gotten done as a way of holding myself accountable to someone else. However, I struggled to even do that and after 2 days stopped texting him because I still wasn't completing any work and was too embarrassed to tell him. When I came in for my session the following week, I very clearly looked embarrassed and couldn't properly look him in the eye. He said, dude, you're coming in here looking like you just ended someone or something. It's okay. You're going to make progress and it's okay if you're not successful at first. It's all part of a learning to improve. You don't need to be scared or embarrassed if you don't succeed the first time. If you don't complete any work, just tell me. I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm here to encourage you and help you manage yourself better. It really helped to hear that because I put so much pressure on myself even though my ability to do things normally is compromised. I still see the same therapist. He's great and has helped me improve a lot since then. Story 5. Psychologists in the US, to name a few, hoarding, intimacy, performance difficulties, history of mistreatment. Unfortunately, it is very common. Substance misuse, amount of money spent on various things, having an ASD diagnosis, going back to a mistreating relationship, staying in a mistreating relationship, grieving years and years after a loss, self-harm of all sorts, wanting to abandon their current lifestyle, for example, to have more intimacy, to escape responsibility or expectations, history of crime, their gender identity, the impact of prejudice, paranoia, hallucinations, feeling uncomfortable in therapy, not believing in therapy, difficulty trusting a therapist, fear of psychiatric medication, fear of doctors in general. I was surprised to see struggling ideation on others' responses. Most of my clients seem to talk very openly about struggling thoughts and urges from the start of therapy, which I think is super healthy. I think that most of the people I've worked with had SI, current or history, and as weird as it may seem, I can't imagine what a life without any thoughts about struggles would even look like. At this point, I don't recall a time a patient said something in therapy and I was shocked or even thought, oh, that's new. And in my opinion, if you surprise your therapist, that's okay. I wonder if we asked Reddit, what are you afraid of to tell anyone, even a therapist, because you think it's weird? How many people would see that they aren't that weird at all? Story 6. I work with a lot of anxiety and trauma clients. Whenever I ask if they would describe their experience as being anxious about being anxious, I get a lot of OMG, yes. Anxiety has such a physical impact on the body, heart pounding, trouble breathing, feeling faint or cold, tunnel vision, that we become aware of our body's reaction before we even notice the anxious thoughts triggering the reaction. Then we panic about why our bodies are flipping out when we're not even aware of feeling threatened, and the anxiety compounds on itself. Anxiety is like an alarm system in our bodies to signal the presence of, real or perceived, danger. What would you do if your alarm was going off at your house? Check to see if there's a real threat. Scan your environment and situation to ground yourself in the present. Turn off the alarm. Breathing exercises do help, along with mindfulness techniques like body scans. And then investigate what tripped the alarm. Process thoughts around the situation that read like danger to you. It's also important to note that danger doesn't need to be a weapon on you. Panicking during a presentation that could impact your job and threaten the way you pay your bills and afford your life can feel pretty dangerous if you think about it. I'm an anxious person myself, and I respond really well to learning and knowing more about an issue. If you're interested, look into polyvagal theory. It goes into great detail around the mind-body response when it comes to anxiety and trauma. Diving into the polyvagal theory is like finding the instruction manual for your brain-body connection. Suddenly, everything makes sense. It's a good read. Story 7. Not a therapist, but a patient, 5 years into caring for my 100% disabled father, and can't agree more. I've always been dubious about therapy and all that, but I know I need it. I'm burnt, mentally exhausted, desperate to have some time for myself, finding time to socialize and maybe a good relationship. It looks so hard, and the only thing that makes me carry on is that I love him and he doesn't deserve to end his days in some elder's residence or something equivalent. He was there to raise me and support me for every stupid thing I wanted as a child, and now it's time to give back. But sometimes when I have to start the day, it feels like I'd throw myself in a lake and get off everything. I'm a casual Redditor. I read a lot but seldomly post, but this time I just felt I also had to express my feelings somewhere. Sometimes you just need to speak or write to someone, even if it's a forum or whatever. My father had a stroke and stayed 199 days in hospital from the 30th of March to the 14th of October 2016. Returning home with many cognitive problems and his brain neglecting his right side of the body. Had his left part of the brain damaged. Luckily, he's still able to speak as he's left-handed. Doctors said that sometimes functions such as language are located in the right side of the brain for left-handed people. He should have been gone. He should have been completely paralyzed. He shouldn't even talk, but somehow he's a damn oak tree, and I love him for that. He can even stand up and walk very little distances, let's say from the couch to the dinner table with my help, but mostly he moves on a wheelchair and needs help for everything concerning primary needs. Had 4 epileptic crises in 5 years, just to add some more spice to it. So I have one more sword swinging above my head every day. When will the next one be? Tonight? Next week? Next month? Who knows? The worst thing of it all is living in total uncertainty of the future. I'm well past my 40s, can't have a job, no future, no plans at all, and I know that anyway it's ending. It's not ending well. No romantic relationship whatsoever. People always think it's about intimacy. No, it isn't. Of course I miss it, but I miss having a woman who can understand me, with whom I can share my thoughts, joys, and fears. You know how it is. Simply, at the current state of things, it's not possible. The vast majority of women run away when they hear I live with my disabled father, no job, and very little spare time to share. I can't even blame them. Who would do that? But in all this disaster, there's one good thing. Before, we never had a good relationship, but now we are father and son more than ever as he understands that if I didn't truly love him, I wouldn't be there for him. I know it sounds strange, but we rediscovered each other thanks to the illness, and I'm grateful for it. And if you're enjoying the video and being touched by one of these stories so far, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 8. Hello, therapist here. There are several, speaking to their departed loved ones. Thankfully, theories now support this and don't consider it to be a sign that they're not moving on with their lives. I encourage my clients to explore the continuation of their relationships with the deceased. Small ways they've made progress in the week. I know this isn't technically weird, but my clients sometimes don't want to tell me this, either because they fear I'd turn around and say they don't need therapy anymore, or because I might find the progress unnoteworthy, both of which are totally untrue. That they're having bizarre, intrusive thoughts of hurting themselves and others, fantasies, and so on. As a therapist, I'm trained to appreciate the whole world that lies between thoughts and action, and all it really proves is that we have an imagination. It's highly unlikely I'll need to break confidentiality, and I won't call the police immediately. Intimacy-related things in general, eventually we'll talk about intimacy, and I'll see a weight lifted off their shoulders for how unfazed I am by their apparently weird intimacy life. Honestly, it's rarely that weird, and we all have fantasies. Life is fruitful, so there's no need to be ashamed. Story 9. Finishing up my doctorate in clinical psychology and primarily work doing forensic assessments, anything from insanity to competency evaluations to children who should be excused from testifying. There's a lot of people who have experienced mistreatment and are ashamed to talk about it, particularly in regard to how it affects their current functioning. Also, self-harm is a big one people tend not to want to discuss as well, but it is incredibly common in this line of work. Honestly, after a client in my first year of practicum work told me he was collecting things and fantasized at length about ending specific people in his life, I was fairly desensitized. I still get the shivers thinking about that client. He was so profoundly creepy in a very genuine way that I'm not sure I can accurately describe. Story 10. Non-straight thoughts are natural. The problem is what is socially acceptable to express and what isn't. It is socially acceptable for two women to kiss, but not two men. And many times I have to talk with male clients about being comfortable in their skin and talking about the attractiveness of human beings. The curvature of a woman's body is lovely. A strong jawline is extremely attractive. It's okay to find someone of the same gender attractive. More than likely, once you talk about it, you can move on from it. Many clients talk to me about mistreatment as I am a trauma therapist by nature. If you have trauma and you're looking to get over it, you need to answer one question. What would my life be like if I absolved myself of all my trauma? I try to help most of my clients and understand the mistreatment they suffered was not their fault. In short, hurt people hurt people. Prejudice is a very twisted and toxic thought process. It's essentially saying, because I look a certain way, I am superior. Many of the clients I work with talk about race for one reason or another because, like it or not, we're all impacted by race. Prejudice was and still is a vital part of American society. With my white clients, the questions are something like, is this bad? Have I been prejudiced against you? Am I a bad person for thinking this? Am I prejudiced? How do I not be prejudiced? The answer to this is yes, you are 100% prejudiced. The structure of America is set up in a way that benefits white skin in particular. This is how systematic prejudice works. On top of this, you need to realize that this has been around for over 400 years. It's not going to just magically go away because of 60 years of civil rights movements. However, in my view, the problem is many white people think being prejudiced means they're bad people, and this is false. Being prejudiced doesn't mean you are a bad person. It means you lack the insight to have empathy for a race other than your own. That's okay. Usually that is solved by just getting to know more people of the race you lack empathy towards. Many of my white clients who are prejudiced towards black people get off easy because I myself am black. I make a good starting point for them. Story 11. In all the years I've worked, I want to note a few things. One, mistreatment is common and that is not okay. And your therapist will not be disgusted or shocked if you choose to process this. I say this because the guilt and shame are crushing, and I want anyone reading this to know that there is nothing wrong with you if you have been mistreated in this way. Women and girls are also often perpetrators, which adds a wholly different level of shame and self-doubt that I want to point out. It can be perpetuated by siblings, parents, aunts and uncles, and grandparents, cousins, and multiple families at different times or concurrently. Often, it is something which the family knows about and yet does not intervene and or blames the victims for. It is not your fault if you have ever been mistreated in any way. It is something we hear about often, and we will not change a single thing other than exploring if you want to work on how this is affecting you. Story 12. I once had a patient tell me they like to touch at least 10 different ceilings per day. He kept a ladder in his vehicle. Every business or home he went into, he would try to touch the ceiling. He would disguise himself as a handyman and pretend he was fixing a ceiling tile or replacing a light bulb. When confronted by business owners, he would tell them that he was called in by a corporate. When he went to church on Sundays and Wednesdays, he would wait until the entire congregation left. Then he would haul in his ladder, sometimes using the pews for his ladder so he could get high enough to reach the ceiling. Once 2020 hit and nearly all businesses and churches shut down, he became very anxious. He knew he had to find a different way to achieve his goal of 10 ceilings per day. Anything less than 10 ceilings per day was just not acceptable. He considered grocery stores but knew that most of the ceilings inside of a grocery store were too high. He considered breaking into businesses after hours but wanted to limit his criminal liability. He even contemplated buying 10 outdoor sheds to place in his backyard but quickly realized that his backyard was not big enough because he lived in an apartment. So what did he do? He quit his job as a taxidermist and started an appliance repair company. Working 10 hours per day, he was able to visit 10 different homes. He once told me that the downsides were that he was making much less money and working around 70 hours per week. He told me that the upside was that his wife divorced him because he was never home. After his divorce, he stopped seeing me. I guess he no longer needed the therapy. His father was a contractor who specialized in designing and installing suspended ceilings. His father learned this trade from his father, and his father learned from his father. His father owned a ceiling design and installation business that was passed down to him through generations. The business was founded in 1927, right before the Great Depression. Little did they know what was right around the corner. Once the Great Depression hit and building development slowed, they had to shut down the family business in 1930. In 1933, his great-grandmother had an affair with a local banker. His great-grandfather eventually found out about the affair and confronted the banker. The banker thought that the physical altercation between the two of them was going to be the end of it. A few weeks later, his great-grandfather blackmailed the banker, telling him that if he didn't provide the capital for him to reopen his ceiling business, he would let the entire community know about his misdeeds. The banker agreed to provide his great-grandfather with $45,000, and they reopened the family business in 1934. To his father's disappointment, my client never learned how to design or install suspended ceilings. Because of this, his father stopped speaking to him when he was 21, and they never spoke again. When his father was no longer able to run the business, there was nobody who could take the business over. They went out of business for the second time in 2008 when the financial crisis hit. He felt he had let his family down by not becoming a ceiling installer and keeping the family business alive. He has lived with guilt ever since. Touching 10 different ceilings every day is his way of paying homage to the hard work and dedication that his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather put into the family business. During our last visit together, he told me he thought he would never find peace with the situation. In fact, he was adding one additional ceiling to his daily list with each passing year. This means by this point, he is now touching 13 ceilings per day. He told me that he added one additional ceiling per year because by the time he is well into his senior years, he wants the number of ceilings he is touching on a daily basis to match the number of years the family business was actually in business. He also stated that the only way he would stop touching ceilings is if he found a way to reopen the family business with the same exact business name. This has been a challenge for him because the market he lives in is saturated with suspended ceiling installation and design companies. He has also run into many financial obstacles. Because of his bout with heavy gambling habits, he is in a lot of debt and his credit is down. Most of his friends and family won't speak to him because he owes all of them large sums of money. Fortunately, he hasn't gambled for over 7 years now, and from what I've heard, his appliance repair company has really taken off. He has 7 employees and just supervisors. This will hopefully allow him to see more homes in a single day, providing him with the opportunity to touch more ceilings. And if you were touched by any of these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.